everybody mute themselves too?
Yep. Okay, so we'll show you. This is the hook is a number 8. The one that's in the vise right now is a number 10. So I'm tying on a number 8 standard wet fly hook. The tail, the thread is going to be black, 6/0 for this size fly. This is a just a standard red hackle, dyed red hackle, and that's going to be the tail and the beard. The rib is going to be tinsel. Now this is the mylar stuff that's silver on one side and gold on the other, but it's going to be a gold, and there'll be a little tag you can notice underneath the tail. There's a little gold tag, so that goes on first. And the body is red floss, or if you had wine, you'd do wine floss. And the wing is mottled turkey quill. And I have several of these. I'm going to tie this one with a little darker shade than this guy. So the first ones I tied with this lighter mottled turkey quill. This one's a little darker, give a little darker wing, because I like this particular one's a little easier to tie with because the fibers of the quill are a little thinner than this one, which I've kind of scavenged, and they're starting to get a little coarse in here and a little harder to tie on. They tend to split if the turkey quill is too thick. Another trick with turkey quills, which I didn't mention at all in the email, is to keep them from splitting when you're trying to get out the slips that you're going to tie on, is to take your turkey quills out and lay them flat or hold them flat and get what's called letter set spray protectant. It used in the drafting industry by guys that do pencil graphic, and they don't want it to, or artists who don't want the graphite to smudge, and they spray it over. It's a very light, transparent protective thing. What that does is it stiffens them up a little bit, but it also keeps the fibers from separating when you're trying to cut them out and tie them in. So you might have to look around for that stuff because it's not the easiest thing to come by. Most artist shops have it. Okay, so we'll take that guy out of there, and we'll put the new number 10 wet fly hook in, or number 8 wet fly hook in. And of course, we always make sure that we take the barb off first so that we don't tie our fly and break the hook and then have to start all over. Put that in the vise good and solid. Now, because I don't mind if the black leaches through, and I want to have the body shape to be relatively even, I'm going to start my thread about 3 eye widths behind the eye, which is roughly where the body's going to end. And I will wrap all the way down the hook shank in touching turns as best we can to dress the shank. And what that does is it keeps the material that you're going to wrap around here from twisting around the slippery shank. Now take that right just a little bit past the bend. And then I'll take the tag off. Now, first thing we do is we tie in the tinsel. Now, I tried tying with the tinsel attached, and I don't have the magnet to make this thing stick nice on the vise. So I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. I'm going to take a length of tinsel and trim it off the spool. Now this stuff is the two-sided stuff. It's got gold on one side and silver on the other. And I want a gold rib. So the way to ensure the rib is the right side is out. When I tie the tinsel on, I'm going to tie it on so that the silver side faces me and it's on the near side of the hook. And I'm going to bring my thread back just a little bit up the hook shank, roughly to where the point is. And I'm going to tie that on with a loop. And I had, when I was practicing this, I had trouble with these darn tinsel pulling out at the back. So I'm going to make a couple of wraps and take my thumbnail and I'll push the little bit of tinsel that was sticking out towards the eye of the hook back and lay that flat on the hook shank. And then I'm going to wrap over top of that. What that does is that locks that tinsel in. So no matter how I wrap it, it's not going to come undone. It's not going to slip right out. Now, to keep my thread out of the way while I wrap the gold tag, I just make two or three wide spaced wraps up the hook shank and let the thread hang. And that gets my thread out of the way. Now I used to with my fingers, I'll wrap 3 or 4 touching wraps or slightly overlapping wraps of gold tinsel down the bend of the shank of the hook, bend of the hook, and get it down about 1/8 of an inch, I guess. And then when I get, this is a problem if I can't keep tension on it. Let's do that again. This stuff tends to kink up and get springy. Okay. So now I've got it down the shank and that bend, and I'm going to bring it back up. And what that gives is a little gold highlight right at the back end of the hook. When I get there, this wide open wraps, I just bring them back, and that will bring my thread right back to the tie-in point. And I'll tie that down, a couple of wraps like that. Then I'm going to pull it back and tie it down again with that silver side facing up. So that's going to be my rib. For the tail, I just take the hackle, and I want some substantial fibers for the tail. So I'm going to take probably a gap and a bit worth of this red hackle, pull them out to the side, grab the tips so the tips are even, and just pull it off the stem. We'll do the same process with the throat. I want my tail to be shank length, so I measure the shank length, and then I'm going to set that down right where my thread is hanging, and I will wrap my thread, little pinch wrap over top of that to get it down right where the tinsel is sticking out the back there. Then instead of trimming this, I'll spiral my thread up the shank over top of the butt ends of the hackle fiber. And you can see what that does. That gives it a nice underbody of hackle. And we'll do the same thing with, again, because I've done this a few times, I'm going to use I didn't like the idea of having the thread out here and then trying to wrap this stuff around. So what I'm going to do with this now is I will use my rotary feature, and I will tie a 1/2 hitch right at the front here. And all that does is that keeps the thread from unraveling on me while I'm doing my wraps of just want to keep that thread out of the way. And I'll take my floss and I'll catch it in at the front. Like that. and trim it. And that's going to be, oh, I did it again. Sometimes if you don't get it down right tight, it pulls right out. So I tie my floss in. Again, that 4 eyewits back of the hook, and I'll get a good solid bind on that this time. And then I'm going to do the 1/2 inch again, because I'm going to use my bobbin rest here to hold on to things. Oh, for crying. You know, what did I tell you about how this slippery stuff pulls out? All right, we'll keep that from happening this time. I'm going to pull the tag ends back. And now that stuff is going to get covered up. Sheesh. 2 pullouts in one. That's the problem with this acetate floss. It is really quite slippery, and it will pull right out of the thread wraps. Now we got it. And I'm going to just get those fuzzy little tag bits there. Okay, now the trick at this point is to get this floss to wrap down nice and flat. So I will gently start wrapping backwards over top of the thread and hackle there. And one of the things that happens with this floss is it tends to unravel on you, or it tends to this acetate stuff tends to get separated. And you see how it goes broadly. That helps on the first couple of wraps around. It helps to keep that body even. But at this point, what I want to do is I want to twist my spool counterclockwise to tighten that up. Otherwise, you end up with stray threads that get in the way. But I don't want to make it too tight. And as we wrap this, it's going to tend to go flat again. But I'm going to keep it fairly tight until I get to the back.
You know, Dave, another alternative for controlling floss,
yeah,
is to actually put that whole bobbin in a bobbin holder.
Yeah, that probably would.
And that also gives you, because what that helps you with is it helps you get the point of the bobbin holder very close to the body.
Yeah.
So you also are less likely to catch that hook point,
on,
which is
on the
where
hook point.
that's where I frame my floss usually. I end up with a mess.
So because I'm using the rotary vise, I don't have to twist the floss around so much to control the width of the floss. It's just everything's being ornery this morning. And then this time I'm going to turn it clockwise. I want a little bit of width to the floss for the last wraps. Now, for some reason, this floss has gone really fuzzy today. There we go. And I'll do another couple of wraps on the clockwise side. So you see I've widened out the floss. And for the last wrap up, it just needs to stay a little wider. And that makes a nice shaped body that is sort of cigar shaped. When I get there, I'll take my thread and I will come up and go behind it a couple of times. And then in front a couple of times, and I will do the same thing. I'll wrap just back where I've bent it over, at least 2 wraps, and that'll keep that from coming undone when I snip it. Now I'll take my hackle pliers and I will grab the tinsel with my hackle pliers. And we'll wrap that over top, and it's not going the right way. There we go. Got to get the silver side in. So the gold side is out and it's not cooperating. Why are you not going over? Okay. Which way we got here? Okay, I'm going to counter wrap because it's the wrong ass way around. It's a trial this morning. I want the gold out, not the silver. So I'm going to have to wrap it, the floss or the tinsel backwards to get the gold rather than the silver on the outside. All right, when I get there, we'll tie it up, wrap behind a couple. And then once again, I'm going to pull it back just a bit and wrap over it. So I folded it over so it's not going to pull out again. So there's my gold rib body. And it's just not working this morning. That is just ornery. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble this morning. Oh, yeah. Maybe I can tie the wings now. We'll see how this goes. Not the best ribbing job in the world, I'll tell you. I think what I'll do, because this is being ornery, I think because those first wrap didn't go right and it's counter wrapped, I think what I'm going to do is put a little cement on there to let it hopefully stay in one place. Darken it up a bit, but I don't care. That didn't happen to me on the other ones because the tinsel wrapped around the right way the first time. Okay, that may stay there. Might stay there. Okay, so now wing. Before I put the wing on, I'm going to turn the fly upside down. And I'm going to put the beard in. And that again is the same hackle material and about the same gap width thing. Tie it, even up the tips. And I got a small piece of red hackle. And I'll measure right just a little bit past the hook point. And I'll wrap that down. And wrap it front to lock it in. Why am I getting? Got some strays there. Get them now before I put the wing on. Okay, now my wing tie-in point is actually that 4 eye widths back from the very front of the fly. And I really don't like what's happened to that rib. Damn it. Well, I just have to live with it. It's a tough morning. All right, so to get the width of the wing, I take another size 8 hook and I will go on the edge of this and I'll stick the point of the hook in there and separate it out like that. That gives me a nice consistent wing width. Snip it out, and then I'll lay it down with the curved side of that facing up. And I'll take the next hackle and I'll do the same thing. These turkey flats, turkey wings come in pairs of left and right. And so we'll take one from one side of one feather from one side, and then one from the feather on the other side. And if I use that hook gap as the measure, then when I snip it out, it'll be the exact same width as the previous one. So these two are now the same width. I've got this one sitting on the workbench with the curve facing up like that. This one I'm going to take curve facing down, and I will line up on the workbench the tips right in front of me. So the tips are even, flat. And then I take my bodkin. This was a trick I saw in one of the videos. When they're all lined up like that, I take my bodkin and I'll simply stab it through the center of the pair of those and pick them up. And look at that. They're all nicely lined up together in one piece. So I grab that, take it off the bodkin, and there you go, my two married wings back to back. And I'll set this down on the hook shank and measure to half, just a little bit past the butt, not quite out to the tail. And that's where I'm going to set this thing right smack on top of the hook where the thread is hanging. I'll pinch it with my left hand and bring the thread up between my fingers and loose wrap down the far side. And before I snug it up, I will bring it back up in between my fingers again and pull straight up. What that does is that keeps the wing from rolling around the shank of the hook. I'll do the same, far side, back up in between, and pull up. And I can let the thread hang down. So there we have it. My wing is sitting smack on top of the hook, and it's not twisted around at all. And then I can lift up the front end of the wing. Oh, don't do this. And I have to cinch that a little more because it's starting to wrap around the shank. All right, now I can bring the front end up and lay my scissors right behind the eye and trim off the butts. And I will come in here and build a head with thread. And I don't mind having a bit of a bulky head, because these things, these English wet flies tended to have a fairly bulky head. When I get the right shape that I want, that's about right. Just a couple of bits under here that don't look right. And then I take my whip finisher and give it a few wraps of hackle with the whip finisher, and then trim that off. And then we'll need head cement, because these are supposed to have a fairly shiny head. So I'll put some head cement on there. Now, one of the problems you have when you put head cement on there like that is that it'll gum up the eye of the hook. And the way to fix that is to take the remnant of your hackle and thread it through and pull it through the eye of the hook. And that takes all of the glue out. So there you are. That's the Montreal with a pretty sad looking, pretty sad looking rib. Anyway, I'll show you the better one that seemed to work a lot better. So there we go. That's how the rib is supposed to look. Anyway, that's it for me. So I will take my spotlight off.
That's really nice to see you struggle once in a while, because it happens so often to me.
Yeah.
It's reassuring to see somebody else do it.
Yeah,
You were thinking the same thing, were you?
and the two things that really did me today is this is not the best floss in the world. It's a cheap acetate, and it frays like crazy. So I couldn't keep the proper width control. And the other thing that happened is, for some reason, when I tied that tinsel in and finished it off, it twisted the wrong way. Because normally when I tie with the silver on the near side, and when I finish tying the tag and then put it upright, I try to keep that silver on the near side. So the first wrap, it flips over and it puts the gold. Well, this time it didn't flip over. Outer wrap. And I think what happens is that loosens the tension on the wrapping rib, and that's why it went screwy instead of getting nice even wraps.
Yeah, so basically, if you want to use those same materials, I would probably try to make two changes. One is to put that floss in a regular bobbin holder.
Yeah.
And the second thing would be, if you're tying a batch of these, put the tails on, build the body, put your tinsel on, and use the rotary vise to wrap it, tie it off, and dunk the thing in acetone. That should cement.
That would simple it
Because
down.
what I would worry about with this type of fly, and not just this pattern, but all these ribbed ones, that tinsel is the weak point of these flies. A couple of fish and you gotta change the fly because your tinsel's ripped up.
So that's
At least
a size,
that's my problem.
That's a size 10 instead of the 8. And so yeah, I got the rib on that one pretty good. And the other problem is that this tinsel is quite fine. That's a very fine tinsel. I think you could probably go with a little bit wider tinsel than what I've used on this size of fly, because that allows it to sit down on the body better. The fine tinsel tends to kink a little bit and go the wrong way. So
yeah, and
anyway,
these tinsels, they're pretty slippery stuff too.
Yeah, they
even
are.
if I didn't use acetate floss, when I do ribbed flies like this, even if I rib them with wire, like on midges, I actually just build the bodies, and if I have to add hackle or wings, I give them a coat of Sally Hansen and let them dry before I move on to the next step.
Yeah, the problem with this one is it has that tag. And when you have the tag, you can't come back in and tie the hackle, the silver in later.
Yeah.
You have to leave that bit of silver tinsel that you're going to wrap up the body. You have to leave it intact. So, and in this one, I had when I put the wings down, I had the curves going opposite direction, which had the wings separate. You could probably tie it that way too. That actually makes a pretty nice looking fly with the wings actually separated from the front rather than tented together. But the typical pattern is to tie them with the tips the curves facing each other.
Yeah, I think there are
Anyway.
just different schools of thought. Some people like to tie them with
Yeah.
the wings kind of curved upside, and some
Yeah.
like down wings, and there doesn't seem to be a settled consensus on
That's
which
it.
way to go with that stuff.
Anyway, that was an adventure.
Well, okay, let's hope mine is gonna work, because I have all kinds of scary steps in here. So we'll see how that goes. I've been warned. All right, so and this is the so-called epoxy minnow, which is basically just a tie-down minnow, because you may notice here that it's tied down at the back, and then the body is covered in some material that's solid and protects it. The original recipe calls for epoxy, which means you have to mix a batch of epoxy, coat a dozen of these things at a time, and then put them on a drying wheel and let the epoxy set, because otherwise it's just gonna sag horribly. So I figured I don't have a drying wheel, and I'm not very keen on working with epoxy, so I'm using instead UV resin. Now, for this to work well, I think you want to use the thick resin. These usually come in three thicknesses: thick, medium, and kind of light. And the light stuff is super runny. I wouldn't come near that for a job like this, because you want to coat this and make some adjustments, whatever, all while keeping this hook in the vise. And if you use anything but the thick one, you're gonna have stuff running over.
Sag.
Yeah, it'll be sagging or worse. You can get drips on your vise. It's just not something that I would even want.
Or the carpet.
Yeah, let's let's not give the gods any more ideas than they already have. Okay. Here's another thing that I struggled with, the tie down part of this fly. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2 spools of thread. I'm going to use an 8/0 thread for tying the fly and tying down at the back. And I'm going to use a 6/0, whoops, sorry. I'm going to use a 6/0 thread. Which one? This one is the 6/0. I'm going to use that at the front. Okay, so let's start by giving the body a thread under base. See, Dave, I'm having trouble here too.
It's
Can't get the thread started. I mean, if I start like that, where's this gonna end, right? Don't want to think about it. Don't want to think about it. So usual stuff. You go to the bend of the hook, and then you want some fluff for the tail. So what I'm doing is I have some big grizzly hackles that have the webby part at the bottom, or even fluffier, something that's essentially, this is also known as chickabou, which is, the Marabou type fluff that you get at the base of a hackle, right? So from doing the California Needles last week, I had a bunch of these feather bases left, and I didn't throw them away. I said, well, I'm just going to
use. What do you find?
Yeah,
keep
dump it.
these and use them.
Jelly stuff.
Sure.
I have this. It's also liquid. I mean, this just looks like it's not any good anymore anyway. Would you put this in, or would you rather have that?
I'd rather have that.
I'm going to strip this off. Get my little clump here. And this is a size 10 hook, so I don't need a huge amount of this stuff. Tie it on here. And what I do with the thread here, I just kind of pinch it between my fingers so that the material doesn't roll on the hook. And I can cinch it all down nicely. So now I have a tail. And the next thing I want is a body. Now for the body, I use just silver diamond braid. I move the thread to the front. You're aiming here for as uniform of a body as you can get. And that's one of the reasons I'm using the 8/0 thread instead of something thicker, so I don't build too much bulk. The other thing to do is you start your body material at the head of the fly, not at the tail. So take your diamond braid, attach it to the hook, and then put a little bit of tension on it and just wrap thread over it. Okay, so this is now giving you, as you can probably see, you have a smooth base to wrap over. Now what I'm going to do at this point is the following. I'm just going to put the thread underneath here and push it back and let it hang. I have little buttons here on the side of the vise that allow me to hang the thread over. And then while keeping the diamond braid on the card, I don't like to cut things. I'm just going to start wrapping in close turns. The reason I'm not using the rotary feature on the vise here is because I have that thread hanging at the back. So there is a reason why I'm not doing this the easy way. And now I get here and I discover that, of course, I should have been paying more attention to what I'm doing. So no worries. You can always lock in the diamond braid on the card and let it hang. It's not going to go anywhere. But what I forgot to do was to start the second thread at the head. Okay, so let's try to save this. So now I'm going to pull up on the diamond braid, get 2-3 wraps behind here, move the thread in front, do another couple of wraps, put a bit of tension on it, snip. Okay, I still got a bit to clean up here. Okay, now, so this is the basic body. It's very simple. Now what I need is a little bit of red here for the gills of this little bait fish that I'm building. And I just happen to have, because I like squirreling materials, I have diamond braid as well, but in red. And it's nice because it has all kinds of glitter to it, which, you know, if you're aiming for flashy, that's probably not a bad thing. So what I'm doing, again, this is in the packet, the way it came. And what I did is I just pulled up a small bit. It's not too much. It's maybe 3-4 inches of it. And then I closed the Ziploc bag over it. So this way I can just let this hang. And I'm going to only use as much as needed. It's not so much that the stuff is expensive, but it's hard to come by. Most of these materials tend to be mail order, and not everybody has them. And, you know, you end up paying a lot for shipping. So these kinds of materials I like to use somewhat sparingly. even the white thread, if I want both 6/0 and white in white and 8/0, my friendly local fly shop will not necessarily have it. Not that they're a bad fly shop, they're good, but you can't always find what you want locally, which is a bit of a problem. So now all I'm doing is I'm letting this thread hang. So now I have a whole bunch of things hanging. I have thread at the back, thread at the front, and I'm trying to wrap this diamond braid. Now notice that I left about 3 eye lengths of space here. So I have room to do the gills. They'll take about 1 eye width of space on the fly. Like this. And I still have about a couple of eye widths there left for the head. Remember, we also have to put eyes on this thing. So same trick, couple of turns behind, couple of turns in front. This will lock it nicely in. Cut. And now tidy up here a little bit. And this is also going to be part of the process of building up a head. That's another reason why I'm using the thicker thread up here. This is going to allow me to build a head much more easily. Okay, next step is I want the mallard. So this is gray mallard, and the way I prepare this is I take the feather. Actually, I should show you a dry one because the wet one doesn't show very well. So what I do, here's a good example. And this is self-explanatory. I cut off the tip and I strip the fluff from the bottom. And then for each fly that I tie, I select a section of fibers. And the way I do that is, this is where I like to get it wet, is that it just makes it super easy to pull on the, so here's a wet one. It's all sticking together. And here you may want to use a bodkin because sometimes separating just a fiber or two, it's easy to see. You look at what's left on the feather after you separated the fibers, and you want that to be as symmetric as you can get it. Okay, and then you just lie this down and then you tie it on. Okay, but before I get to that feather, I have another one that's basically been stripped down to the last bits. So this is how it comes out of the water. It's a bit too much water here, so just put it between your fingers and just squeeze a little bit. And what I like about having a cup of water to do this kind of stuff is that I no longer have to lick my fingers, or even worse, be tempted to lick the feather. So okay, now how this is done, this is very different winging, and you can use this for winging flies as well. So put this thing on top and try to center it as much as you can, and do a couple of light turns. Can even go up to 3 turns, but light. Don't tighten this. And then pull on the stem. See, maybe 1 turn too many. So undo 1 turn. And now this should be moving, as you can see. And pull some more. You want now to adjust the length, right? I want this even. I want this even with the tail, and this is clearly too long. All right, so keep pulling. Hold it in both hands. So hold the wing with one hand and pull with the other, and just kind of, this gives you basically perfect control. Okay. Still a bit long. No, not much more. I think I'm happy with this. Okay, let's tinker a little more. You can fuss with this as much as you like. If you enjoy doing that, then this gives you perfect opportunity. Okay, and now hold on tight and give it a good, nice, tight wraps. Okay, and now we've got this bit. Now I'm not sure for the next step which is really the best way to do it. I'm thinking maybe I could do this in 2 steps. First, tie down the mallard. And again, I want, see, it's getting a little dry. Just wet my fingertips a little bit. Get it wet again. It just makes for a lot better handling, in my opinion. Then catch it with the thread that I left hanging at the back. Tighten on my side so it's not, I don't get it to roll. So everything that Dave explained about dealing with wings and stuff like that very nicely applies here. And this is also the reason why I use 2 spools of thread instead of 1, which is I wanted to have the thread at the ready for the tie down at the back here, rather than trying to both hold on the materials and attach the thread to the hook at the same time. That didn't work for me very well. Okay. And then one last material here is going to be a little bit of flash, and you have a choice of colors here. I used on the sample fly I showed you, I used some electric blue. You can use crystal flash. My preference would be for something that's a little softer. So, you know, limp flashabou is a good choice. So here I have a strand of green, which I'm going to fold twice. So there you go. It's folded. And I'm going to attach right on top of that mallard flank. So there you are. Right on top and center. That's what I'm aiming for here. So now wrap up. Now I'm ready to build a head as well. So this is coming closer to the end. And I'll build a head, and we're going to tie off at the front immediately. Just nice shape. When you're satisfied, grab the whip finisher and give it a whip finish. Or 2, as I prefer to do. Okay, again, a bit of tension on the thread and then cut. Putting a bit of tension on the thread before cutting helps basically bury the fuzzy stuff after cutting into the whip finish, because the thread does have a little bit of stretch. Okay, so now for the final delicate step here, I want to bring in the thread a little closer to the bobbin tip, because what I don't want to do here is I don't want to cut this thread on the hook point. So put some tension, and so that this thing stays straight on top, it doesn't roll on you. Don't cinch down hard yet. Do exactly Same thing as Dave explained, a couple of turns and then cinch that tail down properly. Okay. All right, now is as good of a time as any to trim this to length. Again, you want it even with the tail. Just cut. It doesn't look like much now because it's still a bit wet, so the fluffiness is all kind of gone. And then here at the back, if you're really good with it, which I'm not, you can do a finger whip finish. If you're not very good with it, try to find a source for these gigantic whip finishers. I got mine online somewhere years ago, and I don't use it very often, but boy, when I do need it, it is wonderful. Okay. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to do a whip finish way back on the fly without getting caught up in the eye of the hook. So you can do same thing here as I did before. 2 whip finishes. Is not going to be big and ugly because this is fine thread 8/0. And then trim. Okay, oof. Managed so far. So I still have 4 minutes left, so I think I'll even be able to do this on time and under budget. So let's see, let's not jinx this and move on to the next step. Now you can do this one of 2 ways. At the beginning, maybe you want to do this in 2 steps. So here's what I suggest to start with to make your life a little bit easier and so you don't have to worry about things sagging or anything like that. Take your resin and put a little dab of resin on one side of the head and then on the other side. You know, just a little bit. Smooth it out so that it's nice and uniform, as if you're only doing a coat over your whip finish. Okay? So now what you've achieved is a sticky coat of UV resin. And now comes the fun part. Here are my 2mm eyes. Probably you could get by with 3mm, but 4mm would definitely be huge for this fly. So now I need to turn this so that I can actually see what I'm doing. So what I do is I basically use the tips of my tweezers to just move the eye. It's the glue on the backing on this thing is so bad that it doesn't take much effort. And you end up with the eye just kind of sticking a little bit to the point of your tweezers. And then what you do is rest one hand on the vice jaws. This gives you control. So bring your hands together and rest on the vice, okay? So that you're not suspended in midair trying to do some fine work, okay? And bring this to the fly to the point where you think you would want that eye to be, okay? And you have, you know, turn the vise around, look at it, adjust it a little bit, you know, whatever. When you think it's where you want it to be, turn it upside down and go to the other side and do the other eye. Repeat the process, basically same thing. Try to move that eye there off its backing. Just needs to stick a little bit on the tweezers. It's not, don't try anything fancy, basically. Even a bodkin might work here. I haven't tried, but I don't see why it wouldn't. And again, take the thing, get it to the head of the fly. And because you pre-coated this with some sticky stuff, it'll stick on there just enough. Okay? If this looks fishy to you, then you can stop. Remember, this is bait fish, right? So fishy is a good thing now. Now take your UV light, zap this thing, and with any luck, there was enough resin there, and your eyes are firmly in place. Once you build some confidence with this process, you can do this in one step. You don't have to do it in 2 steps. So you can coat the entire fly and then put on the eyes and then zap and done at once. But now I have to protect the rest of the fly. So the idea here is to put some resin, and again, small quantities is the name of the game. So kind of push it in to the fly. As you can see, small quantities. Make sure you get your resin into that rear thread, which is a weak spot, right? So make sure that that is coated. Here, rotary vise really helps because you turn this around, you put your stuff on, and you look for smoothness. Right? Try to, keep kind of touching it like this. This will smooth out the body. And again, like with the wing, you can fuss here as much as you're inclined to. I don't know how fussy the fish are about this, but we like our flies to come out nice. So, okay, make sure that the head is also coated so that those eyes are well protected. You can also make the head a little bulkier, a bit more prominent. There you go. I think this looks good to me. I don't know if this is any good, but it looks good to me. So what I'm going to do now is call it a day, bring my lamp out. And again, I don't let this sit for too long to give the resin opportunities to start sagging. And like I said, that's the main reason for using the thick formula. And then a couple of turns under the light usually does it. Yeah, nice and dry. Fly is done. Takes a little bit of time, but I think it looks fishy.
Looks great, Florin.
Very nice, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And don't make sure that I guess it's no longer a problem. I have a bottle of loon resin that I bought years ago, which does not, it stays tacky forever. And then it cracks. Now I haven't used this for long enough to tell you whether it cracks or not, but it sure dries when it cures. It's no longer tacky. So make sure that when and this resin is expensive. I mean, that's the downside of it, but the convenience you gain of, being able to do this without all the fuss required with epoxy, makes it worthwhile for me. So that's the idea.
Oh, Florin, it's a beautiful looking little fly. It's perfect. It looks like a little fry with an egg sac, and should work well.
I do hope so.